Welcome everybody to Weekly Quantum World Detangled, Season 4, Episode 3. I am joined by my sponsor IonQ and the beautiful person of Denise Ruffner.
Hi everyone, Denise Ruffner. Traveling for the first time since COVID, and I'm actually in the IonQ office, so it's kind of thrilling and get to see everything today. And I also want to thank André for that spectacular IonQ backdrop with the chain of ions. And we're delighted today to have Michael Marthaler as our guest. So Michael, if you could introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Michael Marthaler, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of HQS. And at HQS, we work on simulation of materials because, say, if you want to simulate a material, you best start from the laws of quantum mechanics. And I guess we will get much deeper into that type of questions during our discussion.
We will, and we look forward to it. First, we hope to get to know you a little bit. I always try to do my research courtesy of Google, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and other secret sources before we speak to our guest. You are our second German guest this month, and I had the same problem with Marcus last week. There's nothing online. So Michael, just wondering, is that a typical German trait to maybe be less active as a founder or scientist, especially on social media, or is that just a coincidence?
Probably a coincidence, but yes, I'm not active on social media. I'm not a big fan of social media in general. Let's say I'm a big fan in terms of general, just as a standard news stream, but I don't really like to use it myself in terms of communication or so. I think the kind of form of communication is often too short, and then is not really well suited for.
But you did study in the US, in Michigan, for a while. Didn't you learn the American way of advertising and promoting yourself?
Not really. So I studied for a year. I did my master thesis at the Michigan State University with Mark Dickman, who is from Russia originally. And so, I mean, I wouldn't say, it was excellent, but I wouldn't say that the overall experience was that strongly American, maybe.
You did study or rather work, I believe, in Japan for a while. So is that a culture that maybe spoke to you more?
I mean, I worked for about 7 to 8 months in Japan. And I worked in groups which were really strongly Japanese, so I was the only foreigner there. And I do not speak Japanese. That did give me a lot of time for work. And that was very effective. But I cannot really say that I so strongly learned all that much about Japanese culture as such. Yeah, I mean, it was excellent work in terms of science, and I liked my stay. But, I cannot really say all that much about Japanese culture as such.
I found one other foreign experience on your resume when you went up to Scandinavia.
Sure.
Did you pick up any hiking there, hunting, sauna, any hobbies?
Not quite. I mean, my private life is not very exciting, to be honest. I mean, I work mostly. And I mean, Stockholm was nice, a little too cold and dark for my taste, but otherwise Sweden is amazing as a country.
Well, it's great to see that you had so many international experiences, and we'll talk about how that has helped you at HQS in a minute. I did find one last final personal tidbit. You're into theater and singing. Is that correct?
That is an interesting find of you. I mean, how did you find that?
It is on your LinkedIn as
really? Oh, true.
Right.
Okay, it's true. Well, actually, at the university. Okay, so I have it on my LinkedIn profile. Yes. So, at the university where I studied, at some point, One of the physics students had a bet with the social sciences department, people from there, that we could stage a play of the physicists. The physicists are very well-known play in Germany. I think it's regularly performed everywhere. And so we did that, and I actually then directed it, and out of this formed a theater group at the physics section, which still exists to this day. And I was active there for, let's say, 3 to 4 years, somewhere between 2003 and 2008 or so. It was very good.
Very interesting. Maybe we can talk about quantum and art someday. You really are a researcher and academic by background with a very long and illustrious career. Much of it spent in Karlsruhe, where I was born, only lived for a couple weeks before moving to Frankfurt. Tell us a little bit about your research background and how you made the switch to being an entrepreneur, really. And we'll have Denise dig into HQS after that to find out more about what you're doing. But what got you into research? Why did you stick to it for so long? And then why did you make the change?
So, I mean, I worked in the field of superconducting qubits, let's say broadly speaking. Let's say condensed matter physics and superconducting qubits, so theoretical work on a lot of questions surrounding decoherence. So why are qubits sensitive to errors, and what is the source of it, and what is the mathematical description of that? And around 2012, I would say it became kind of clear that the field is working well, that the qubits are working well, and that the quantum computing could really go and the quantum computer could be built potentially. So, I mean, 2012, there was a publication from the University of Yale, and for example, Chad Rigetti was involved in that, and I think it was second author, which showed very, very good superconducting qubits. And this was a very reproducible work as well. So it was not just like a single device, but every lab after that could basically more or less reproduce it. And this convinced me that this field could really work out. And at that point, I started to think more and more about what applications for early quantum computers would be. And that means especially like the current noisy quantum computers. And I also thought that my background of working on noise in quantum mechanical bits would be useful for this type of work. And, you know, I mean, I just found it a very interesting goal to say, okay, I have done all this kind of weird stuff in academia, and I would really love if this would actually be useful. And being useful, meaning by really people like broadly using it, and that would mean making the company, making the product, and then people use it. Yeah. And so this was like already 2012, I started to think about this. And then at that point, also 3 students started to work with me, starting with their bachelor thesis, and then they stayed with me through, let's say, master, PhD, and so on. And then I started to think about how to create the company. What is the goal? What would be our product, and so on. And then we started in 2016 to talk to people, you know, I mean, companies around Karlsruhe where we work. And this was good timing, because then I would say 2017, so directly after we started to talk to some people, the hype started to really take off. And then they basically, we directly could start as a company by making consulting for these companies that we had gotten to know, in particular BASF and Bosch.
Very interesting. And you're doing what I believe is the smartest thing an entrepreneur can do: extreme focus, quantum simulation for the development of new materials. So Denise, let's find out more about their customers, their funding, their goals, their dreams, and everything else.
Okay. Well, I hope I can measure up to your questions, André. Mike, Michael, I'm going to call you I'm going to be American. So
No,
I'm sorry.
definitely do it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm totally fine with Michael. I mean, that's really wonderful.
So I think I first met you in 2017 when HQS started. Very excited. You've kept your focus since inception, where we've seen a lot of companies pivot or expand, and you've kept your focus. And I wanted to just talk to you. I think you've developed quite a broad offering. If you could talk a little bit about the simulation and quantum work that you're doing, as well as you have two fabulous customers with BASF and Bosch.
Mm-hmm. I mean, in general, this field of microscopic simulation of materials is fundamentally not as big as the potential fields that you could imagine, like optimization or so. But we felt that in terms of really getting something to run early on the quantum computer, it was the right choice to stick with that kind of field. And basically our work is in some sense still kind of distributed to areas. One is really getting stuff to run on the quantum computer, where the focus is on dealing with the noise and the decoherence. And the other part is basically related to material simulation on normal computers. Because once you look into the question of what would you really want to do on the quantum computer, when you look at the real workflow in industry, for example, there's only a small part of the real problem which you would want to really simulate quantum mechanically. It can already be quite valuable to do that now, to, let's say, take a problem, cut it apart into smaller parts, solve some of them still on a normal computer, solve something still on a normal computer, but with a method that is really high-end, very expensive on a normal computer, and this is the one that you would want to translate in the future on the quantum computer, and then put it all back together. And this is actually also an established field in quantum chemistry. So people work on this kind of taking like this kind of big simulations apart and putting it back together and so on. And then we are, let's say, we do our own work, but we also do services. Yeah, because it's an established field, there's open source, a lot of people work on it. So we don't necessarily feel that we cannot reinvent this field. Yeah, it's more like putting the right tools together for, let's say, specific problems, and learning from this where we would plug in the quantum computer to create maximum value. And this is basically like the two kind of things that we are doing. Of course, currently there's a lot of research grants, also going on in Europe, and we are part of several of these research projects, European funded, German funded, but they are also basically distributed over these two topics.
That's great. That's really good. Now, you've also won two customers that are kind of very prestigious and working with BASF and Bosch. Do you, are you kind of full as a company in terms of customers, or are you acquiring new customers?
We are definitely acquiring, looking out for new customers, but let's say our clearest topic where we look for new customers is actually related then to normal computing. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because on the service level, where we basically build this type of software tools that, let's say, generate a more automatic workflow for specific problems, take it apart and put it back together and integrate high-end quantum level methods, where we could put in the quantum computer in the future, but currently it's all on a normal computer such that it can generate value already right now, so that it works and you can use it for problems right now. But of course, for the customer, it's also attractive. I mean, generally, they have to be attracted to the final goal of quantum computing, But the idea is to make something that works right now and work towards quantum computing then in the future.
And I know that you work with a number of different quantum computing vendors. So I think one of my questions is a general question. Do you ultimately feel that there's going to be a certain type of quantum computing that is going to be more amenable to a certain application? Or do you view quantum computers as general platforms?
I mean, who knows, you know? I mean, let's say if you look at the really long run and fully error-corrected quantum computers, I mean, it's not so clear how this is going to look, yeah? Currently, the question of how does the noise look like on a quantum computer is, of course, something that differentiates various platforms. And generally, you want to have your noise as small as possible, but beyond it, they're generally characterizing your noise just by fidelity. Other properties, of course, matter. You know, is it like decoherence, or is it miscalibration? Is your computer stable over, let's say, a couple of hours of runtime? Yeah, I mean, we know that this type of devices can be stable only on a very short time scale and need to be recalibrated. I mean, it's a well-known problem, well documented. And kind of on this level, I guess there can be a lot of differentiation coming between different devices. Now, another issue that is also, I mean, not unimportant is, let's say, how quick is a single operation? Yeah. In general, of course, you know, we always assume that the things that we do on a quantum computer are things that are beyond the ability, or that we will do, let's say. We will do things on a quantum computer that are beyond the capability fundamentally of a normal computer. So in some sense, there's no competition. However, there's always competition between you solve the problem on a quantum computer or you just don't. That's still an option, you know, you just don't solve the problem. And for this, the question basically, how much calculation can you cram on your quantum computer in, let's say, 1 year, which determines in the end the cost per calculation. Yeah. And there, the question of how fast is a single operation, or how fast can you run like one operation after another, or one calculation after another, still matters a lot. Yeah. So then let's translate this, the matter of how much will, let's say, one calculation, and calculation time defined by the coherence time, how much will that cost, will still be a critical question in terms of will there actually be applications for quantum computers.
And what do you think, timeline? Do you have any ideas on timeline?
So we think that quantum computers will be used for academic purposes soon. I don't know. I mean, actually, let's say I had hoped already now. I would say we are not. I mean, and when I say for academic purposes, not only for academic purposes, I mean, people use it already now quite heavily for the purpose of, you know, working on quantum computing itself. Yeah, a lot of people are really interested in playing around with real devices. That's a huge topic. And people use real devices to do exactly that. But I think for there are academic research fields where you could use the quantum computer as an academic research tool, you know, similar to a very expensive microscope, for example. Yeah, universities buy super expensive microscopes, and then they are used for very special purposes. And this is basically how we see the quantum computer currently, where it's first really going to be used, not just to learn about the quantum computer itself, but to learn about something else. Yeah, and that's probably also going to be, I mean, well, you're not surprised to hear that what we think is that it's going to be simulation of quantum mechanical problems. Yeah, I mean, that's what we do. So that's what I think is the first thing people will do then. And this we think could happen soon. I would have hoped actually now already it to be the case. It's not really the case yet, but next year, latest, let's say 2022, we would really hope that this takes off. And then let's say more industry, I don't know, 2026, 2027. Yeah, I think this is going to also come from people who work on the quantum computer in academia, PhD students and so on, so who use it for their research, who then can take this and also take it into industry. Such that first these kind of really difficult to use devices, which may be a type of process and type of also insight that you can gain from using it, that is just something you don't do in industry yet, because it could not be done so far. And it's not super easy then for an industry company to say, oh, hey, we want to, let's say, introduce a workflow that does something that we actually don't do right now at all. I mean, in the industry, you want to take your workflow that you have and make it faster and cheaper. If you don't have it at all, then it's a bit difficult to introduce. So it's maybe better to first see in university groups, they use it and it's like really working, and then, you introduce it into industry. So we really hope that it's going to be big for people in nuclear physics, quantum field theory, biology, maybe chemistry, in academia soon, and then later in industry.
Migrate out into industry. Yeah, I'd love to see more uptick of quantum computing and biology, but that's a topic for another day. One other question is, I looked at your page on your website and your team has grown quite a bit. Congratulations. And I see that you've had some good seed funding and you mentioned grants. Can you talk a little bit about funding, or is that confidential?
Sure. I mean, we have, our investors are known, it's a big German fund, HTGF, and two VCs from München, B2V and UVC Partners, and that's it. I'm not sure what else. Maybe you have more concrete questions then. These are our funders, and we have two angel funders. It's actually a local brewer here from Karlsruhe, who was our first funder. So, I think he just found it interesting what we do and like to be involved. And
That's great. That was really my question, to get a little background on your funding. And it's interesting that they're German venture firms. There's a lot of strong German venture firms, so I think it's great. And now I'm going to hand it over to André.
Thank you both. Very strong and clear opinions from Michael there. Love to hear that view of the quantum universe. Michael, if you're ready, we have a short 6-question lightning quiz, 1-sentence questions and 1-sentence answers, or shorter, adapted from the French philosopher Marcel Proust. So if you're ready, the first question, Michael, who is your favorite scientist?
Badin.
What did he do?
He actually won the Nobel Prize twice in physics. Once for inventing the MOSFET, super important. Once because he's the B in BSC, Badin Cooper Shriver, BCS theory, which is the theory to describe superconductivity.
Nobody mentioned him before, so worth.
That's why I mentioned him. He is really underappreciated.
What is your favorite quality in a scientist?
I guess being objective. We all should be that as scientists. It's difficult in real life, to be always objective, but you have to struggle towards being objective.
Do you have a favorite entrepreneur?
Kind of, but probably nobody, there are, here in Baden, or the southern Germany region, is actually one that is entrepreneurially quite strong in its own way. Very different, I would say, from Silicon Valley or so, but I am quite fond of quite a few entrepreneurs here in the region, but it's maybe none of these type of really famous big names.
What do you like most about working in quantum tech?
It's what I know how to do it. So that is very nice if you know the field. And maybe to answer this differently, why did I get into it? I don't know. I kind of wanted to work on computers, and I like quantum mechanics, and then I got into the field somehow. I don't know. It cannot be more concrete than that. It just happened.
It's logic. Do you have, outside of what HQS does and maybe even beyond computing, a favorite quantum tech application?
Quantum sensors. It's a great topic, and I really hope that this goes into mass production soon. Really, like that. I don't know. Maybe in the mobile phone, or something like really big. This would be amazing for the whole field, I think.
And they deserve a lot more attention. Do you have a quantum dream or a quantum nightmare?
Well, I mean, I think dream would be that we really achieve quantum advantage very soon for real applications, even if it's only an academic type. I mean, that would already be, I think, absolutely outstanding. Yeah? The nightmare is if let's say, if we don't achieve it, let's say in 5 to 6 years, we still do not have quantum advantage on noisy devices for something that gets broadly applied, at least in academia. Yeah.
That does sound scary, but imagine we go even faster. Tomorrow you wake up and you have a beautiful, universal, fault-tolerant quantum computer in your living room. The only one in the world. Who do you give it to?
That would be awesome, of course. Yeah, I mean, the dream of having the universal quantum computer much earlier is indeed very appealing. So
what do you do with it?
Well, I mean, we would still stick with quantum simulation, but the things you could do are of a completely different scale, completely different than what we can imagine with noisy devices. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, simulation on a universal fault-tolerant quantum computer. You heard it here first. This concludes Season 4, Episode 3 of the Weekly Quantum World Detangled. Thank you to Denise Ruffner and our sponsor, INQ from Maryland, where INQ is having a big meeting this week. Thank you, Michael Marthaler from Karlsruhe. It is always great to hear from Germany and of Munich. And we can't wait to see you again next week. You are now detangled.